Love podcasts ain't nonsense. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Take 2, even better than the first one.
Even better.
Laura Beveridge.
Sean Hickey.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Are you excited to be living in this post-local elections world?
The turquoise wave has hit.
It has. We're just starting, I guess. We won't know the full results until 1 p.m. But from the offset, they've got a massive head start.
Yes. So we're recording this in the morning, dear listener. So there may be more news at the time that you're listening. But at the moment, we have a Reform MP in the shape of Sarah Pochin in Runcorn.
Returning the party in Parliament back up to 5 MPs post losing Rupert Lowe.
The ideal number of MPs for Reform is 5. And they've been at 6s and 7s since losing Rupert Lowe. But now they feel whole again.
And they have women now as well.
Crucially, yeah. I think I saw LBC, Henry Riley was speaking to Sarah Pochin afterwards, after she won the by-election. And the question was along the lines of being Reform's first female MP. And I'd never seen an MP say something like it before. Maybe Kemi Badenoch has said something to this effect at some point. But Sarah Pochin said that she doesn't really think of, which is a good thing to say, that like, male, female, doesn't matter. I'm me. I've won. I'm the representative of Runcorn. But then she went on to say, like, men also have very difficult lives and things that that put them at a disadvantage. And I felt seen by an MP for the first time ever.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
I wouldn't say she's a DEI hire.
Well, she is the men's mental health minister of Reform UK.
But another female win for Reform as well, in the form of Andrea Jenkins, who is the new Metro Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire.
Both of which are formerly of the Conservative Party parish. Pochin was a councillor in the area that Runcorn is in. And obviously Andrea Jenkins was in Boris Johnson's cabinet. Famously told the British public to fuck off.
Yeah.
What a fantastic world that we're living in, that people who vote for, I think we're in like a metasphere of it, right? The Labour Party line is, or has been, we're the party of change. A vote for Labour is a vote for change, which was what they were running on no less than a year ago, Laura Beveridge.
Yep.
No less than a year ago. You now have a party of the right claiming to be the real party of change, aptly named Reform UK, but comprised almost entirely by former Conservative MPs and councillors. Where I can't work out where the change in any of it is.
And also led by a UKIP candidate as well. Like, these are all people that are establishment political figures that are leading the Reform Party. They aren't insurgents to the political establishment. They've been about for decades in British political life. They are so ingrained in it that to represent themselves as the outsider is quite laughable. But that idea of change is really powerful, because I went to Runcorn before the by-election was officially triggered, but when it was quite imminent. And I spoke to a couple of the people there. Shall we hear from them?
Let's hear from them.
I think Reform should take over.
Why do you think that?
I think they've got better ideas. They're talking more common sense. This government's making a right mess of things. And I think we should look at reform for the future to put this country right.
Do you agree with that?
Totally. Exactly. Totally everything that Derek said. I think we need to have a fresh start again, and I think Reform's going to be the one to do it.
Did you guys vote for Reform or Mike Amesbury at the last general election?
Yeah, Reform.
I think probably Reform might well win that. And I think the politics of the day probably need a bit of a shake-up, really.
Why do you think Reform would win here?
Well, it's just the sense I have of people being ready for some change, and although, as I said earlier, he's been a good MP, I think there's a stirring about to have a change.
Would you be voting for that change?
I probably would, actually, yes. So I'd probably be voting Reform, I think.
All depends who it is, but I would vote Reform.
Why is that?
Because Mike Haines is not Labour candidate.
So you're only voting for Labour here because it was Mike Amesbury?
Yeah, and he did things for the community, which the government's not doing anything for the community, are they?
Do you think that Reform could win in this constituency?
I hope so. But if Mike Amesbury was here, no.
So there we heard people saying that they are just quite desperate for change. I mean, the constituency there voted for change by voting in Mike.
Do you think they're going to hear that?
There's like a scratching sound, yeah.
There's a demon outside the studio, listener. We're not sure if you're going to be able to hear this. We'll try our best to get rid of the demon. But if you can hear it, you will find out on Tuesday if we're still alive.
Yeah. So, what should I start? I'll just start from the...
Oh no, we're leaving all this in.
Okay.
Yeah. It adds to the
Great
character.
listening for them. Yeah, so those voices we just heard, they clearly voted for change. Runcorn and Halsey voted for change, which was, like you said, the Labour Party's slogan during the general election. Mike Amesbury won by a large majority. It was as large as safe seats in Hackney and Shoreditch. It was a huge majority.
As large as a small town.
Yeah.
15,000.
Yeah, it was a huge majority. A safe seat. But then clearly those people felt like the change hadn't been delivered in the 7-8 months that Labour had been in power, and they were still desperate for it, and they saw that change in Reform UK.
I think there is something to be said for how you constitute change or how you define change. The defence of Ellie Reeves was on the broadcast round this morning, drew the short straw, had to go out and make out as though there's nothing to see here. We still have a massive
fine.
Majority. Everything's fine. And the line being, people voted for change. We're delivering change. Change is slow, incremental, yada, 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 yada. One of the things she had to point to was waiting lists in the NHS going down. Absolutely fine. Fair enough. If you are the party of the left, the party of the worker, or certainly born of the party of the worker, and you do things that are, well, you've got things like the workers' rights bill coming in. That may be a change that people can look to at some point in the future, but there is nothing material to look at now.
Yeah.
And look, we talk about them not being in power they haven't been in power for a year yet. But still, there are things that could have been done at some point in the past 9 months that have just not been done. You look at things like PIP payments, you look at things like the winter fuel payments, the 2-child benefit cap. None of these things are going to endear you to the public. And you can't continue down this line of austerity by the back door and expect people to continue to have faith in the project, because at some point in the future, like I can't, if you're drowning and there's a lifeboat that comes by and says, well, I don't have a life jacket for you now, but there's a bigger ship coming. That'll be here in like 5 years. Just tread water there for a little bit. Can I get on the boat? No. I'll give you a life jacket when the bigger boat comes. If a turquoise coloured lifeboat comes along at some point and says, I'll give you 10 life jackets at some point, you say, okay, I'll go with that guy.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're not an asylum seeker, probably wouldn't hand
So
you
long
that.
as you're not an asylum seeker, then the turquoise boat is just going to sail right on by. But you know what I mean? Like, you can't expect the public to just believe you forever.
Hold on.
Yeah, you need to have some sort of demonstrated track record, and 9 months is enough time to have done something to change people's material conditions.
Yeah.
I think, this isn't going to be the last time. And like, look, it was one of those things, wasn't it, before the local elections that was bandied about that this is going to be, the bigger news story is going to be the implosion of the Conservative Party from the high watermark of the 2021 locals. the complete domination of certain councils. And that is all to come this afternoon.
Yeah.
But at this moment in time, it doesn't look good for Labour either.
Yeah. I think just to pick up on what you were saying about what policies have cut through and what haven't, like you said, obviously they have things like the Renters' Rights Bill, Employment Rights Bill, which will eventually make material changes to people's circumstances. But right now, when I went to Runcorn and Helsby, it was before the PIP cuts, but it was after the winter fuel cuts. And that was all anyone was talking about. When I said, what do you think of the Labour government? It was, well, they've taken away my winter fuel payment. They weren't saying, oh, well, you know, they've started charging VAT on private schools. They weren't saying, oh, isn't how great that is. All that they were talking about was winter fuel, and now it will be PIP cuts too. Those are the things that have cut through, and it feels like with those actions being some of the first actions the Labour government has taken that affect people's lives, and it's largely affected pensioners and the vulnerable the most. It does feel like at this point they're just handing Farage the keys to number 10. It's rolling over is what it looks like. There doesn't seem to be any vim in the government. It's all defensive. It's all having to fix what was there before. The language of a conservative government, the language of the right, rather than a line of inspiration, a line of hope. Nothing is hopeful with this government. And the only thing that you can hope for is they stop posting those fucking TikToks like that aura thing. I would have really enjoyed, I think Reform quote tweeted a Labour post from yesterday where it was, you know, the last couple of weeks they've been just going in on Reform, a vote for Reform is a vote for the Conservatives, yada, yada, yada. And Reform just quote tweeted one of those tweets this morning with laughing Farage. That's how you do social media comms. It's not like aura farming the most boring politician. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The fact that these fan edits don't exist for your leader tells you all you need to know about your leader. You don't need to force, you shouldn't be forcing it in the first place, because otherwise, like, none of us are going to get on board with that. Well, no one else is making the fan edits, so
someone has to. Someone has to.
I think what is interesting about the Runcorn by-election is it felt like Labour didn't put up a fight in the constituency. Starmer didn't visit, which I think is interesting. He could have done that. And also, I think there is some kind of saving face of, we only lost the seat by six votes. It was very marginal. It wasn't that big a loss. Reform gained 15,000 votes. Yeah. It's not that they didn't win by 6 votes. They won by 15,006 votes. Yeah. That's the story. And the vote share went from 18% to 38%. And like you were saying, the larger story of today is probably that it's the collapse of the Conservative vote in councils. But also the other story that's emerging is actually where Labour are holding, their margins by which they're holding by are completely diminished by Reform, who are hot on their heels.
Razor thin, yeah. Like you've got the mayor of Doncaster, who was speaking to Laura Koonsberg early in the morning. Should we listen to that?
Yes. Working man and woman and businesses want national government to listen to them and listen to them properly to help drive this great country forward.
You quite clearly are worried that Keir Starmer is not listening to the concerns of most voters in this country. I know you suggested that on several occasions. What would you say directly to him?
What I'm saying to Keir is this. He needs to listen and take action, but also remember they've been in government a short length of time. We've got to drive places like Doncaster forward. Keir's got to drive the country forward and actually deliver economic growth so all can prosper.
So that's Ross Jones talking to the BBC after being elected mayor of Doncaster on a majority of 1%. The striking thing being these are the things that Labour were taking as wins overnight, But you have this mayor coming out and saying, we need to do more. Westminster are doing nothing. And people like me are seeing the consequences of that. We're going to lose power in local authorities. We're doomed if they don't do something. So it's in tune with everything we're saying at the moment, right? That this line of like having to make tough decisions, having to steady the ship, having to balance the books. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. There are many other ways that you can do these things that do not affect the most vulnerable people in society. Everything you are doing is a political choice, and people like, or constituencies like Doncaster are slowly but surely turning to the reform vote. I mean, I can't remember, I don't know if we have it here, what the swing was for reform, but the very fact that somewhere like Doncaster has a 1% margin for Labour should be something that terrifies the party at large.
I wonder, does this all give credence to the Reform line that they are now the official opposition? If Reform are coming second or first in all these local elections, and the Conservative vote is collapsing, are they the official opposition?
Certainly in local politics, it seemed that way, right? I mean, the councils that weren't up for grabs yesterday are quite heavy on the red side. But there is diversity in it as well, but it is largely a Labour-dominated local authority space. Are they the official opposition in local politics? Possibly. It is certainly something for the Conservative Party to pay attention to and look out for when it comes to the next election. I think also more interestingly, it's the kind of... we're not in a two-party state anymore. There isn't a swap. There isn't going to be a swap every 10 years between red and blue and red and blue. There is going to be a lot more of a rainbow in British politics going forward, which I think lends itself to people like the Green Party as much as it does to Reform, where you've got kind of like, you know, Reform, the Lib Dems, the Green Party are all staunchly in favour of changing the electoral system to a proportional representation system. If the Labour Party were acting like a Labour Party, it would benefit them as well. But it's always the way, right, that Labour are pro-PR up until the point that the first past the post system helps them out. And so I think it's less that they're the opposition, because at the end of the day, they've only got 5 MPs. But they are certainly going to be a force to be reckoned with in British politics going forward. What do you think? I just think that right now, because of the way that Labour are governing, there is this huge space that's being left in British politics, which I think lots of people now are vying for, like whether it's the Greens vying for the left wing vote, or whether it's Reform vying for the working person's vote. Like, these are both votes that would have traditionally been easy Labour wins. And I think if you listen to how Nigel Farage is speaking, and he spoke to Ava in her piece when she visited Runcorn at the launch of Sarah Pochin's campaign, and he is talking about how Reform are for the working person, but like he defines working person a lot more narrowly than the traditional Labour line. He's not counting people on welfare as part of that, or people who have had an accident at work and can't work anymore. But then on the other side, you have people like Eddie Dempsey, who I spoke to yesterday at International Workers' Day. He was saying that Labour have abandoned the trade union movement and have abandoned workers in that sense as well. Shall we hear from him? I don't see why we shouldn't.
The trade unions are part of the Labour movement, and the Labour Party for many years has been wedded to this neoliberal agenda, and like a tree pulling up its roots, it's destroyed working class communities and destroyed the trade union movement. We've got to bring that back if we're going to rebalance power in a society, and we're going to have more unity, because right now the country feels extremely divided, And how do you bring it back? You bring us back. Put us back where we belong. The Employment Rights Bill is an important step forward, but it doesn't go far enough. We could have another P&O next week under the Employment Rights Bill. And as I've said, they were elected on the basis of bringing back sectoral collective bargaining. That's badly needed.
It's always good to hear from Eddie, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, new General Secretary now as well.
Of course. Has he been ordained yet?
I think is he, or is he incoming, or has he not been ordained yet?
He is the General Secretary, but I believe that the end of this month there is a ceremony.
Ooh, official celebration.
Yeah. Much like the conclave. It absolutely is not like the conclave, but it would be really interesting if it was.
The train will have like black smoke or white smoke coming out of it, like when he's coronated.
Habemus General Secretary.
Yes.
So what was Eddie Dempsey saying there?
Well, he thinks there are some good things about the Employment Rights Bill, and it's not far enough. Labour have removed trade unions from being at the centre of their party, and that this ultimately disadvantages the worker. And it just feels right now like Labour are afraid to be the Labour Party. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure why, because it's not benefiting them. Yeah.
The question then becomes, who is the representative of the union movement? The further away from the union movement Labour position themselves. Traditionally, you wouldn't say that the Green Party would be the party of the railway driver, the train driver, the steel worker. And so I wonder, does that open up space for a new party on the left? Does it open up space for kind of like defections from Labour, defections from the Greens, independents all joining together to create a new left-wing party, new Labour?
You have the Independent Alliance.
You do have the Independent Alliance. It could be that. It should be that.
I think it could be that.
Yeah.
But right now it's very much not that.
Correct. It isn't that. It's very much not that. What would you call it? Is it new Labour?
New Labour.
New Labour. That's
a very different party.
So I'm going to go back to the office now and copyright that name, just in case. NU, not new, NEW. Yeah, I think the longer this goes on, the more, because there are going to be more by-elections in the next, as I said, we're not even a year into it yet. We've got another 4.25 years to go. There are going to be more by-elections. There are going to be more stories like this. This is not the first time Labour are going to lose a seat. It's not going to be the last. They are going to... Their MPs, whether the 2024 intake is a different thing, but I do think old guard MPs in the Labour Party, maybe your Andy McDonald's, maybe your whoever it might be, are going to start getting restless, and when you've got this kind of like this bubble around Keir Starmer, whether it's your 2024 intake of Starmerites.
Young, ambitious.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Young, ambitious MPs. There is going to be a split in the movement. There is going to be the traditional Labour MP, traditional Labour voter versus this kind of like almost Lib Demi Labour. Like there's, when you look at how the seats have fallen, or how the seats are projected to fall in these local elections, you're losing a lot of Conservative seats. Mm-hmm. You're also losing some Labour seats. Mm-hmm. And there are Lib Dem gains there's Lib Dem gains, there's Reform gains in there. And I think it's worth interrogating where the Lib Dem votes are coming from. Where the Conservative votes are coming from, because I don't think it's all just Conservative to Reform.
No, definitely not. And I think you can see that by the narrowing of the Labour Reform vote share at the same time that the Conservative vote share is collapsing, that means there is Labour voters going to reform.
Yeah.
Or not voting at all as well.
Or not voting at all. Exactly. Much to ponder. Much to ponder.
Do you think that immigration has had anything to do with these local election results, or the mayoral election of Andrea Jenkins, who said that asylum seekers should live in tents, by the way?
Yeah, I saw that this morning. Yeah. I mean, undoubtedly, that's kind of like, it's been the, outside of the Reform Party, it's the UKIP, it's the Brexit Party, it's every party that Nigel Farage has been involved in for the last however many years has had immigration at the fore. As time has gone on, and especially with the Labour Party in charge now, I think there's a more full-throated attack line from the right, where you can, I think it wasn't the stats going around earlier in the week that 2025 is already the biggest year for channel crossings since records began. This is still something. It's not summer yet. When it gets to summer, it'll probably ramp up as a news story and as an attack line from Reform and the Conservatives. The Conservatives, Labour have the luxury of kind of being able to brush it off, right? They can't really do that much with Reform. They can start slagging off Nigel Farage. Like, you see it at PMQs every week. Unprompted, Keir Starmer starts talking about the member for Clacton for no reason whatsoever. You are showing kind of, in not offering a response, in not offering an answer, in not offering a solution that people who are turning to Reform can get behind. And at the same time, giving oxygen to Nigel Farage when you're in Parliament, you're giving more and more credence to the policies and to the attack lines of the Reform Party. So, yeah, I think it does have a big hold on these elections, but I think a lot of it is as well the transition of who is the real representative of the right.
Yeah.
The Conservatives are kind of at a loss at the moment. They're still finding their feet after last year. Kemi Badenoch is having a tough time of it, to say the least, when she's got Robert Jenrick speaking out of turn whenever he wants. She's not like the voice of the right
anymore. She doesn't really have a vision either, I think, for what the Conservative Party should be in 2025 or how to address it. And I think for the last 10 years, since 2015, it feels like centre parties in this country have no idea how to tackle immigration, but also in which way they should approach immigration. It feels like there's no agreement on either of those things. And then parties to the right do have an idea of what they want to do about it, but in reality, it's a totally unworkable idea that actually doesn't change the number. And I think, interestingly, in the Runcorn by-election, both Sarah Pochin and the Labour candidate, Karen Shore, were running on the same platform of closing the local asylum hotel. Because I think actually, like, immigration, when we see it on TV, or it's a number, or it's people crossing the channel, it can feel quite distant and quite disconnected. But I feel like the use of hotels and local communities has actually brought the issue of immigration directly onto people's doorsteps. And these hotels there's like 213 hotels being used during the general election to house asylum seekers. A lot of locals are very unhappy about that, but also at the same time, hotels are actually not a very safe or good way to keep people for extended periods of time. So you have, left and right-wing arguments that are against the use of them. No one's happy with the use of hotels to house asylum seekers. But that's almost like one in every constituency, or in 2/3 of constituencies. So it has become a hyper-local issue, immigration. And I think, interestingly, if the asylum hotel does close in Runcorn and Helsby, because Labour do have plans to stop using them, and I think they've closed 13 already, have plans to close 9 more imminently. If the local asylum hotel does close because of Labour central policy, Sarah Pochin will be able to claim that as a reform win.
Of course she will.
Yeah.
Of course she will. That's what one always
does. She's in a win-win situation there.
They don't close it.
It's
I have
Labour.
ample. Yeah.
If you close it, it's me.
Yeah. The hotels thing is... It is part of the conversation, isn't it? But it gets nowhere near as much attention as the spectacle of the Channel or the people arriving in Dover. I haven't seen it in a while, maybe because it's been winter for the last 6 months. But it's been a while since I've seen that imagery of a dinghy arriving on the beach in Dover and people jumping off and running into the town. And with that, you hear questions every now and again, whether it's Home Office questions or whatever, of my constituency has this hotel in it. Because it's not also like it is not a good way to house asylum seekers to put them in a room.
Yeah,
and
you're in a Holiday Inn. Yeah.
Knock on their door, here's some food, stay in there.
You can't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, legally.
But outside of it, whether it's a Holiday Inn or a Premier Inn or whatever like that, some of them are like family-owned hotels that would be like where the local football team would have like their end-of-year drinks, or people are having weddings, funerals, this kind of thing. It's a community hub.
Yeah.
And from one day to the next, you turn around and say, you are no longer allowed to use this facility. Your children might work there while they're studying or in school or whatever like that. You lose kind of this beating heart of communities for the sake of for managing overflow and for being like, well, we can deal with that later. Yeah. Let's just do this now. Let's just give the hotelier money. He can do this. Fine. You're going to breed discontent within communities for that.
And I think it's also, you can't just dismiss people who are concerned. Like they are allowed to feel concerned. And I think because mainly they're saying these are people that are awaiting their approval from the Home Office to see if they will be granted asylum in the UK. And their argument is, well, we don't actually know who these people are. And I mean, but obviously the majority are legitimately claiming asylum.
Yeah, of course.
But for the people in the town, they will be concerned, like, well, I don't know who this person is. Are they a legitimate asylum seeker? Are they not?
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you be concerned? You know, you've had no... the government haven't liaised with you. The authorities haven't liaised with you. This kind of thing has been quite a problem, a wedge issue in Ireland for quite a while. The use of hotels for housing asylum seekers has been something that we've been doing for a very, very long time. And our colleagues actually at PolJOE last year did a report in Roscrea, which is a town in Ireland that has quite a small population, no more than 20,000 people. And the scene that I was setting out there a moment ago of like the hub of the community being the hotel, people live, work, breathe of the hotel. There's no clubhouse, a few pubs, all that kind of thing. And from one week to the next, with no consultation, with no prior warning, we're going to have a town hall meeting and you get to speak to these people.
Yeah,
you get
we
to
can
do this.
assuage your concerns.
Exactly.
We can reassure you. Yeah.
Yeah. You have this this spectacle of people arriving in buses and buses and buses, and the hotel being closed. People who are employed in that hotel are given the choice either to retrain out of their own pocket to be able to manage working with people from traumatic backgrounds, or have no job.
Yeah.
And the guys who went down there were speaking to the locals. It was a couple of days after there was kind of this astroturfed far right protest in Roscrea. Most of the people that were at the protest were not from Roscrea. And speaking to the locals afterwards, the whole argument is exactly what you're saying, you know, that like, the general through line was these people who are here legitimately, who are here fleeing war, persecution, famine, whatever it might be, of course we should be doing our bit to help these people out. I've no idea who's living in there.
Yeah.
And I've not seen a single one of them. I've not spoken to a single one of them. Of course you'd be scared by that.
I think that is the issue as well with like the current asylum seeker and the asylum seeking system and the use of hotels, is that they're held in limbo for such long periods of time because of things like the Home Office backlog. They aren't allowed to work. They're not allowed to integrate with the community they've been put into because of how the asylum system works, which will naturally breed suspicion from the people that live there. So it's like a structural problem that is building this hostility. And I think as channel crossings increase over summer, like you said, this is just going to be fertile soil for reform. It's going to be brought up again and again in the Commons, and it's going to become a real thorn in Starmer's side, despite his white paper that's going to get tough on immigration, and he's going to lead a crackdown on immigration and all of this rhetoric that he's feels like he's taking to because reform have shifted the Overton window. But if he's not actually going to address it because we haven't seen a centrist party be able to.
Well, all in good time.
We'll see.
We will. Shall we leave it there?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you in the Reddit. Bye-bye.